The second stage of the writing process is known as drafting. Drafting your first rough draft, where you transform the outline into a rough draft. And so generally, the introduction to a piece of writing announces the main point. The body develops it, usually in several paragraphs, and the conclusion drives it home. You can begin drafting, however, at any point. If you find it difficult to introduce a paper that you have not yet written, try drafting the body first and saving the introduction for later. Your introduction will usually be a paragraph of 50 to 150 words. In a longer paper, it may be more than one paragraph. Perhaps the most common strategy is to open with a few sentences that engage or hook the reader and that establishes your purpose for writing and your central idea or thesis. And so when you write your introduction, you have a hook, 5 background sentences, and your thesis. So in the following introduction, the thesis is highlighted. So your thesis is the last sentence of the first paragraph. So that is the highlighted yellow part. And so whether you are writing for a scholarly audience, a professional audience, or a general audience, you cannot assume your reader's interest in the topic. The sentences leading to your thesis should hook the readers by sparking their curiosity, drawing them into the world of your essay, and giving them a reason to continue reading. So let's read this one. As the United States industrialized in the 19th century using immigrant labor, social concerns took a backseat to the task of building a prosperous nation. The government did not regulate industries and did not provide an effective safety net for the poor or for those who became sick or injured on the job. Immigrants and the poor did have a few advocates, however. Settlement houses such as Hull House in Chicago provided information services and a place for reform-minded individuals to gather and work to improve the conditions of the urban poor. Alice Hamilton was one of these reformers. Her work at Hull House spanned 22 years, and she later expanded her reform work throughout the nation. Now you have your thesis statement. Hamilton's efforts helped to improve the lives of immigrants, drew attention and respect to the problems of people that until then had been ignored. So this is an excellent introduction paragraph because she starts out general about the United States being industrialized in the 19th century, and then like an upside down funnel, she becomes more specific to her thesis. So your introduction has a hook, 5 background sentences, and then it has your thesis. And this is known as a funnel introduction paragraph. Strategies for drafting an introduction. Whether you are composing a traditional essay or a slide, the following strategies can provide a hook for your reader. So your very first sentence in an introduction is a hook to grab the reader's attention. Offer a surprising statistic. Ask a question. Introduce a quotation. Provide historical background. Define a term. Propose a problem. Use a vivid example. Develop an analogy. Write a story. If you come from a culture that prefers indirect writing, you may feel that asserting a thesis early in an essay sounds rude, but in the United States, readers appreciate the direct approach where you state the main idea right away. And then after you write your introduction, you're going to write 3 body paragraphs. The body of your essay develops support for your thesis, so it's important to have at least a working thesis before you start writing. What does your thesis or main idea promise readers? What question are you trying to answer? What problem are you trying to solve? What is your position on the topic? You may have already written an introduction that includes a thesis, and you can, if not, as long as you have a draft thesis, you can begin developing the body and return later to the introduction. If your thesis suggests a plan or you have sketched a preliminary outline, try to organize your paragraphs according to the outline. Draft the body of your essay by writing at least 1 paragraph about each supporting point you listed in the planning stage. If you do not have a plan, pause for a few moments and write an outline. However, at times you might not know what you want to say until you have written a draft, and so it is possible to begin without a plan, assuming you are prepared to treat your first attempt as a discovery draft that you may need to revise deeply at a later stage. Whether or not you have a plan or outline when you begin drafting, you can often figure out a workable order for your ideas by stopping each time you start a new paragraph to think about what your readers will need to know to follow your train of thought. And this happens usually when someone just sits down and writes the rough draft without writing their outline first. And many students do that. Using sources responsibly. As you draft, keep careful notes about sources you read and consult. If you quote, paraphrase, or summarize a source, include a citation, even in your rough draft, to avoid plagiarism. As you draft, you might decide that support for your thesis would come from one or more visuals. Visuals can convey information concisely and powerfully. Graphs and tables, for example, can simplify complex numerical ideas. Images, including photographs and diagrams, often express ideas vividly. Keep in mind that if you download a visual or use published information to create your own visual, you must credit your source. While drafting, consider how a visual supports your purpose and how your audience might respond to the visual. If you create a chart using information from your research, you must cite the source of the information, even if the visual is your own. So here are many different kinds of visuals. You can have a pie chart, you can have a bar graph, you can have an infographic, you can have a table, and ChatGPT can create tables. You can have a photograph. You can have a diagram. You can have a flowchart. Microsoft Word has all of these. Okay, Microsoft Word can create tables. It can create flowcharts. You can have a map. Draft a conclusion. So all of your visuals should be in your body paragraphs. A conclusion should remind readers of the essay's main idea without repeating it. The concluding paragraph might also remind readers why the main idea matters or what's at stake. Your conclusion should drive your main point home and give readers something more to consider. To conclude an essay, analyzing the shifting roles of women in the military services, one student discussed her topic's implication for society as a whole. As the military continues to train women in jobs formerly reserved for men, our understanding of women's roles in society will no doubt continue to change. As news reports of women training for and taking part in combat operations become commonplace, reports of women becoming CEOs, police chiefs, and even President of the United States will cease to surprise us. Or perhaps we have already reached this point. To make the conclusion memorable and to give a sense of completion, you might bring readers full circle by returning to the thesis or including a detail from the introduction. Whatever concluding strategy you choose, keep in mind that an effective conclusion is decisive and unapologetic. Avoid introducing new ideas at the end of the essay. And because the conclusion is so closely tied to the rest of the essay, be prepared to rewrite it as you revise your draft. Strategies for your conclusion. Briefly summarize your essay's key points. Propose a course of action. Offer a recommendation. Discuss the topic's wider significance or implications. Redefine a key term or concept. Pose a question for future study.